The day Elena drove out to the rural shelter to pick up the St. Bernard, the sky was a low ceiling of gray cloud, heavy and mute, as if already mourning what was to come. Mercy, the dog, was found abandoned in the woods 2 weeks prior, her belly swollen with life and her coat matted with mud, burrs, and something darker that no one cared to identify. Elena had rescued dozens of animals in her time, some aggressive, others broken, but never had she seen eyes like Mercy's, soft, pleading, and yet almost hollow, like something vital had long since been taken from her. The staff had warned her that Mercy was skittish, barely ate, and growled when touched, but Elena waved it off with her usual quiet determination. She told herself love could melt anything, that time and tenderness would thaw the frost behind those eyes. On the long ride back home, Mercy barely moved in the back seat, except for the occasional tremble that passed through her like distant thunder. Elena softly hummed a lullaby her mother used to sing, hoping it would do something, anything, to pierce the veil. When they arrived, the birthing room had already been set. Clean sheets, soft lights, warm air, a haven crafted with care. Mercy hesitated at the door, sniffed the threshold, and slowly limped in. Elena noticed the deep scars along her back legs for the first time, lines that spoke of chains or wire, not nature. Still, she kept smiling, whispering reassurances, calling Mercy a good girl, a brave girl, as she laid a blanket across her broad shoulder. That night, Mercy didn't sleep. Neither did Elena. The contractions began at dawn, a pale slice of sun bleeding across the floorboards as Mercy let out her first low groan. Elena was ready, gloves on, towels prepped, emergency contacts within arm's reach, but nothing prepared her for the intensity of it all. Mercy thrashed and howled, her body contorting with each contraction as if being torn apart by invisible hand. The first puppy arrived still, and for a horrifying moment, Elena feared it was gone. But after some frantic rubbing and a breathless second, it whimpered, and Mercy licked it once, twice, before curling back into agony. 5 more came after, each alive but weak, their cries barely audible over Mercy's snarls. She didn't want Elena near them. Each time she reached toward the whelp, Mercy's lips peeled back in a snarl so violent it made Elena flinch. It wasn't the normal protectiveness of a new mother. It was feral panic, like Mercy believed Elena had come to take them away. Elena stepped back, arms raised, speaking soft and slow, but the tension was a noose tightening with each breath. When she tried to place a heat lamp closer to the pups, Mercy lunged, not just a bark or a snap, but a full-body leap, her teeth inches from Elena's face before slamming into the wooden side of the whelping box. Elena fell backward, her heart sprinting, hands shaking as she realized this was not going to be like the other. The 6th puppy was born tangled in its cord, and when Mercy refused to let Elena help, it suffocated within minutes. That was when something inside Mercy shifted. Her panting became erratic, eyes wild, her head jerking at shadows like she was trying to fight off ghosts. Elena, fighting tears, called a vet, but was told they'd be at least 90 minutes away due to a storm clogging up the back road. She sat just outside the box, watching the scene like a prisoner behind glass. Mercy's fur was slicked with blood, her chest heaving as the remaining puppies squirmed beneath her belly, looking for warmth that Mercy didn't seem to notice. One by one, they began to fall still, exhaustion or cold. Elena couldn't tell, and she made a decision. She waited for Mercy to doze off, even for a second, and that's when she crawled in. Quiet, slow, delicate, like a thief in her own home. She reached the smallest pup, the run who hadn't moved in 10 minutes, but as her fingers grazed its fur, Mercy's eyes snapped open. The sound that came out of her was not a bark or a growl, but something guttural and unearthly. Teeth flashed. Elena screamed. Pain tore up her forearm as Mercy clamped down. It wasn't just fear, it was betrayal. Blood dripped onto the blanket, mixing with the birth and the silence that followed, a silence so absolute it screamed. Mercy backed into the corner, ears flat, eyes filled not with rage but with a sorrow too deep to name. Elena sat there, cradling her bleeding arm, staring at the dog she wanted to save, and wondered how something born of love could twist into something so cruel so fast. The storm outside began to howl. Elena didn't go to the hospital. She couldn't bring herself to leave the house, not with Mercy pacing around the whelping box like a ghost tethered to unfinished business. She stitched her own wound with trembling hand, the puncture marks deep and red and still raw with betrayal. Every throb of pain reminded her that something was wrong, not just with the bite, but with everything. Mercy wouldn't stop growling, not even at the sound of Elena's voice, which once calmed her. The puppies, what was left of them, seemed equally tense, flinching every time their mother shifted. Elena moved her operations to the hallway outside the birthing room, watching through a baby monitor she installed in the upper corner of the ceiling. She felt like a stranger in her own sanctuary. The woman who once sang lullabies and wrapped dogs in fleece blankets now carried pepper spray in her pocket and closed the door with a broom handle from a distance. The first full night after the birth was sleepless. Elena sat on the cold wooden floor, listening to Mercy pace and bark at nothing, the sound rising and falling like waves crashing inside a coffin. At one point, the camera feed went black. Static hissed for 3 minutes before returning, and when it did, one of the puppies was gone. Elena searched the room the next morning, her arm in a sling, calling softly, checking under blankets, behind the bedding, but there was no trace of the pup, no blood, no body, no clue. That was the first time she felt true fear. Not just worry for the animals or sadness about the failed rescue. Real, bone-deep fear that something else was in the house. She began to question her memory. Had she miscounted? Had the pup wandered off somehow? Impossible as that seemed, but the door was locked. No windows were open. She checked the footage again, over and over, watching frame by frame. And in one blurry instant, the puppy seemed to vanish behind Mercy's body, only to never reappear. She confronted the dog, standing at the edge of the whelping box, demanding answers like a parent scolding a child. But Mercy only stared back with those glassy, endless eyes. That night, Elena dreamed a chain. Heavy, rusted chains dragging across concrete. Dogs barking in an endless loop. Puppies wailing. A door slamming shut behind her. She woke up drenched in sweat. The static from the baby monitor louder than before, almost aggressive. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and yet she couldn't let go. Mercy had become a puzzle, a wound that refused to close, and Elena was obsessed with understanding her. She contacted the shelter again, asking for more information, but they had almost nothing on record. No prior owner, no chip, only a note found near Site 32. Do not return. Site 32 wasn't even a proper address. It was a coded location used by the county for off-the-map animal dumps, places so remote that GPS failed. Elena loaded up the car 2 days later, leaving her neighbor to watch the house for a few hours, needing to see for herself. She followed old logging roads and dirt paths, finding Site 32 nearly swallowed by the forest. There, she found rusted crates, some still stained with old fur and feces, and the remains of what looked like makeshift kennels built from scrap metal. Bones, too. Dog bones. She nearly threw up. The air smelled of rot and forgotten things. And even though it was broad daylight, the silence was unnatural. Then, behind one of the crates, she found a collar, torn, but with the name Mercy stitched in faded thread. So she had once belonged to someone. Someone who left her here to die. On the way back, a flat tire stranded her for 2 hours, and by the time she returned home, the house was too quiet. No barking, no growling, just stillness. She unlocked the door and crept into the birthing room. The whelping box was tipped over, blankets torn, and Mercy stood in the corner, shivering, covered in something red. Not blood, but paint. Crimson handprints smeared along the wall, like someone had dragged fingers through wet acrylics. Elena screamed for her neighbor. No answer. Her phone buzzed. One new voicemail. It was her neighbor. Hey, I just stopped in to check on the pups. All quiet, but that dog. Elena, I think you need to come back. Something's not right here. Static. A crash. Silence. Elena found a shoe near the back door, but no sign of the man. The puppies were down to 3 now. Elena didn't know what to do. She should have called animal control, should have brought in help, but guilt held her back. This was her rescue, her responsibility, her burden. The next few days passed in a fog. She started locking herself in the guest room at night. Mercy began scratching at doors. The puppies wouldn't eat unless Elena placed food with tongs, and even then they barely touched it. A smell began to grow in the house, something foul and metallic. She cleaned obsessively, but it always returned. The lights flickered. The baby monitor began picking up whispers, soft, low words she couldn't understand. Elena told herself she was sleep-deprived, hallucinating, but part of her knew the truth. Something had followed Mercy from that place, something unseen, and she had brought it into her home. The house had become an echo chamber, each sound stretched and distorted, as though the walls themselves were whispering back. Elena kept the baby monitor on at all times, its screen a permanent fixture on her kitchen table, but the puppy's cries had dwindled to near nothing. She'd sit for hours watching the grainy footage, Mercy pacing, pausing, staring directly into the camera as if she knew Elena was watching. The puppies, now just 2, barely moved. They didn't play. They didn't whine. They simply lay curled up together, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect, eerie sync. Elena began recording the footage, rewatching it in reverse, frame by frame, trying to make sense of the second puppy's disappearance. Just like before, one moment it was there, the next it wasn't. No movement, no attack, no clue. It was like they were being erased. Not stolen, not killed, erased. She considered setting up infrared cameras, motion sensors, maybe even a live stream to some animal behavior forum. But the thought of letting the outside world peek into what had become her personal hell made her skin crawl. No one would understand. No one could. She began noticing things outside the house, shadows in her periphery when she drove. A black van parked across the street with tinted windows that never seemed to leave. Her mail stopped arriving. Her phone glitched every time she tried to call for help. The landline gave nothing but static. Her laptop shut down each time she typed the words animal control or report. It felt like the house itself was reacting, defending whatever secret Mercy carried. On a rare calm night, she decided to sleep in her own bed again, desperate for something resembling normalcy. At 3:07 a.m., she woke to a low whimper. The sound wasn't coming from the monitor. It was in her room. She bolted upright. Mercy stood at the foot of her bed, but she hadn't made a sound entering. Her jaw hung slightly open, and one of the remaining puppies dangled limply from her mouth. Elena screamed, leapt out of bed, and Mercy simply dropped the pup and fled down the hallway. The puppy wasn't dead. It blinked slowly, chest rising and falling like it was waking from a dream, and Elena wrapped it in a towel, rocking it like a child. She tried tried to lock Mercy out of the room, but the dog scratched at the door until morning, never barking, never growling, just clawing, steady and slow, like it knew time was on its side. The next day, Elena discovered deep gouges in the basement door. She hadn't even realized it had been opened, let alone entered. Dust covered every stair, yet somehow there were fresh paw prints, too large to be Mercy's, too spread out to be normal. She descended into the basement with a flashlight, heart pounding, the air growing colder with each step. The walls dripped with condensation, but there was something else. Marks, symbols etched into the stone, circles, crosses, spirals, and in the farthest corner, she found a pile of bone. Not old, fresh, tiny, not all of them canine. Some were unmistakably human. She backed out slowly, phone in hand, ready to take a picture, but it died the moment she raised it. Mercy stood at the top of the stairs, blocking the exit. Her eyes were different now, not wild, not afraid. They were knowing. Elena didn't remember how she got past her, only that she ended up outside, barefoot, sobbing in the driveway under the rising sun. She called a friend from a burner phone she'd kept for emergency. Rachel, another rescuer. Come now, was all Elena could say. Please. Rachel arrived that afternoon, skeptical but kind, the way only people in rescue circles could be. She insisted they take Mercy and the last pup to a facility for evaluation. She's too unstable, Elle, she said gently. This is beyond maternal instinct. This is broken. Elena begged for one more night. Just one more. Rachel relented. That evening, they both camped in the living room, taking turns watching the feed. Around 2 a.m., Rachel whispered, "Where's the puppy?" Elena's blood ran cold. The monitor showed Mercy curled in the whelping box, but the last puppy was gone. They ran to the room, Rachel ahead, Elena behind. The box was empty, blankets scattered, Mercy nowhere to be seen. Then came a noise from the hallway, a high-pitched, warbling whine that didn't sound like any animal Elena had ever heard. They followed it to the basement door. It stood open. Rachel went first. Elena screamed for her to wait, but it was too late. The door slammed shut behind her, locking on its own. Elena pounded on the wood, shouting, sobbing, but no answer came. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Then a whisper slid through the cracks in the door. It wasn't Rachel's voice. It wasn't even a voice at all. It was mimicking, as if something was pretending to be her. "Elena, it's warm down here. Come see." The voice was wrong. The rhythm was off. It hit her like ice. It was the same tone the baby monitor had used earlier, an imitation. Mercy was at the end of the hallway again, her mouth slick with something dark, her body twitching like something else had taken hold. Elena fled the house barefoot into the wood, adrenaline drowning out thought, every instinct screaming. She ran for what felt like miles. When she finally stopped, she turned back to look, but the house wasn't there. The entire street was gone. Just trees. Endless, whispering trees. When Elena awoke, the forest was still. No wind, no birds, no sign of life, just the overwhelming hum of silence pressing in on all sides. Her bare feet were scraped and blistered, her limbs trembling from the cold, and her breath fogged in the morning air like steam rising from forgotten kettle. She had no memory of falling asleep, no idea how long she'd been out there, and when she checked her phone, the date had changed. 2 full days were missing. Her first thought was Rachel, then the puppy, then Mercy. But her second thought was something darker. Maybe she hadn't left at all. Maybe the woods had swallowed her the moment she crossed their threshold. She stumbled back toward where her house should have been, guided only by muscle memory and aching hope, but there was nothing. No road, no mailbox, not even a clearing. Just forest, thick and endless. She screamed until her throat cracked, hoping for some echo, some sign of Rachel or help, but the forest returned only the sound of its own breath. Eventually, she found a trail, barely more than a game path, and followed it through the underbrush for hours until she emerged onto a gravel road near a derelict gas station with boards over the windows and a single payphone clinging to a wall like a relic. She dialed the police. The voice that answered was calm, too calm, asking for her name, then repeating it back with a pause. "Elena, Morin," as if uncertain. "We don't have any missing persons report file for you," the dispatcher said. "Are you sure that's your legal name?" Elena choked on her answer. She tried explaining everything, the dog, the house, the rescue Rachel, but each sentence unraveled under its own weight. "There's no record of a Mercy," they told her. "Number 911 calls placed from your residence, and no property listed under your name in that area." Her voice broke as she insisted she wasn't crazy. "Please," she whispered, "please just check." But the line went dead. She stood there for what felt like hours, receiver dangling from her hand, watching the sun sink beneath a sky that seemed too big. With nowhere else to go, she walked and kept walking until she reached a diner lit by flickering neon, where she collapsed into a booth and begged the waitress for water. The woman behind the counter stared too long. "You okay, hon? You look like you've seen a ghost." Elena looked up, and for the briefest moment, she thought she saw Mercy sitting outside, watching through the window. But when she blinked, the glass was empty. A kind trucker gave her a ride to the city. His name was Hank, and he didn't ask too many questions. "Sometimes you just gotta outrun the dark," he said with a half smile, offering her a sandwich and a blanket. Elena spent most of the ride in silence, but as they neared the outskirts, a familiar sound crackled from the radio, a soft, high-pitched whimper. Hank frowned, twisting the dial. Damn interference. Ain't even got a dog. But Elena Elena was already crying. She knew that sound. It was the same from the monitor, the same from the hallway, the same from the dream. "Pull over," she gasped. "Please." Hank obeyed, confused, and she spilled out a truck like her body no longer belonged to her. She ran until her legs failed her, collapsing in the middle of a strip mall parking lot, screaming. Paramedics came, then a social worker, then a white room. For a week, Elena was listed as a Jane Doe in a psychiatric hospital, sedated and restrained, murmuring about puppies and paint and whispers in the basement. No one believed her, but someone was listening. One night, a nurse slipped into her room and whispered, "I've seen her too." The dog, the eyes. Elena's chest seized. The nurse's hands trembled. "You brought her back," she said. "You weren't supposed to." Before Elena could speak, the woman was gone. Vanished. Like the puppy, like the house, like Rachel. The next day, Elena found a photo slipped under her door. It showed Site 32. But this time, there were figures in the background, blurry, black-eyed silhouettes, watching, and among them, a girl holding a St. Bernard puppy by the tail, face stretched in an unnatural grin. The back of the photo read, "She never left." Elena tore to pieces, but the pieces reassembled themselves on her pillow the next night. The hospital declared her delusional with persistent visual hallucination and scheduled her for psychiatric evaluation and extended observation. But on the eve of her 14-day mark, a fire alarm sounded. Her room was empty when they checked. Gone, like everything else. No witnesses, no camera footage, just claw marks on the window and a single paw print on the wall beside the door. Weeks passed, then months. A rescue center in another state reported a large St. Bernard with strange behaviors found wandering alone near a nursing home. The dog refused to eat unless left completely alone. Any attempt to photograph it resulted in the camera malfunctioning. Several staff members reported missing time. One woman swore she saw a small, hairless puppy crawling under her bed at night, but no one believed her. Mercy, if it was Mercy, never stayed long. She moved from town to town, state to state, always pregnant, always watched. Elena's name resurfaced in strange places, on graffiti under bridges, on old pet adoption sites as a pending profile, even on a defunct shelter listing that read, "Home visit required. For final approval, you must meet her eyes." People began to whisper. Rescuers went missing. Puppies turned up in places they shouldn't be, in locked rooms, in gravesites, in car trunks with no blood or trauma, just emptiness. Something was wrong. Something had always been wrong. And wherever Mercy went, she carried it with her like a parasite clinging to a fractured soul. One final recording leaked online. A dash cam clip from a highway patrol officer who stopped to help a woman walking barefoot down the interstate, holding a limp puppy. The woman turned. Her eyes were entirely white. The footage ends there. Authorities denied its authenticity. But those who've seen it say the woman's voice at the end was clear, calm, and unmistakable. "She's hungry again." The forest had grown larger, not in size, but in presence, as if it spread beyond its boundaries, bleeding into the edges of every town, every alley, every quiet space people assumed was safe. Whispers of mercy began to rise from the unlikeliest corners: homeless shelters, animal clinics, backwoods veterinary offices. They all shared the same story. A giant dog with sunken eyes, dragging her belly low, followed by invisible pups that couldn't be seen but always felt. Elena, or what remained of her, was now nothing more than a rumor. A barefoot woman with blood-stained arms and a lost look, asking if you'd seen a St. Bernard with eyes that could burn through the dark. Most ignored her. Some offered help. None of them remembered the encounter the next day. Their phones would be wiped, their clocks misaligned, time stuttered around her. One vet assistant in Oregon reportedly took her in for the night. The next morning, she was found 3 miles away in a ditch, muttering nursery rhymes in reverse and cradling a bundle of towels. When unwrapped, it held only dirt and a single tooth. The rescue world, normally built on tight-knit communities, trust, and share heartbreak, fractured. Forums shut down. Private Facebook groups were locked and archived. Old-timers who'd been in the game for decades quietly quit, packed up their kennels, and moved to the city, hoping the urban noise would drown out whatever Mercy carried with her. Others went looking, searching through Site 32 and the hundreds like it, wondering if they'd unknowingly released something long buried beneath humanity's careless need to fix what couldn't be fixed. But Mercy wasn't just a victim. She had become something else, something older, woven with grief and rage and the sound of puppies dying unseen. Elena's name appeared in classified ads, scribbled in alleyways, scrawled on the underside of church pews. Mothers who lose never forget. In one grainy CCTV clip leaked to a darknet forum, she was shown walking into a pet store just after midnight. No one opened the door. It simply unlatched for her. She walked through the aisles silently, trailing her fingers along the bags of kibble until she reached the puppy section. The camera glitched. 5 minutes later, the footage returned. Every puppy was gone. The crates were still locked. The air, they said, looked thick like it was underwater. In a rural Montana town, a farmer found a dog-shaped nest in the center of his cornfield, crafted from bones, wire, and strips of bloody denim. At its center was a litter of 7 hairless creatures, none of them quite dog, none of them fully alive. The nest burned itself to ash within hours, despite rain. When investigators arrived, the field was gone, just a crater, and the word hush scorched into the ground. Elena was seen nearby, nearby, carrying a collar engraved with her own name. She wore a dress made of vet tech scrub stitched together with dental floss, and on her back, a canvas sack that squirmed. A local officer tried to stop her. He died a week later, his body turning cold from the inside out. The coroner wrote cause unnatural cessation. It was around that time that whispers started reaching the shelters. Some claimed their cameras caught glimpses of Mercy in their intake kennel, even though no one had brought her in. Others said their newborn litters would disappear overnight, their mothers unharmed but visibly altered, detached, silent, as if they'd been replaced. Elena began appearing in dreams, not nightmares, dreams. She'd arrive in an open field, bathed in moonlight, her face gentle, her arms open, whispering, "Don't let her nest here." Those who remember the dream would often find their pets missing the next day, or they'd find a new one, a puppy no one recalled adopting, sitting quietly in the kitchen, eyes too wide, breathing too slow. The puppy would vanish by nightfall. The vet couldn't scan it. The shelter had no record. It simply was. The phenomenon grew. Whispered legends turned into cautionary tales, then into something else. Children drew pictures of the dog that cries, and teachers began to find those drawings stuffed into desks after class and signed. In one photo, submitted anonymously to a rescue website that was shut down hours later, Elena stood in the background of a church baptism, holding a newborn puppy like a christening gift. Her mouth was open. The photo was soundless, but some who viewed it reported hearing a low chant. Mine, 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 mine. Eventually, a name surfaced in an old county records archive buried under flood-damaged boxes. Mercy had once belonged to a man named Enoch Ferrier, a private breeder who had been shut down in the early 2000s for illegal cross-species experimentation. He had vanished before sentencing. Rumors claimed his last known location was near Site 32. When authorities excavated the land there again, they found the remains of over 70 animals and 3 children. The deeper they dug, the more bones surfaced, and at the very bottom of a makeshift pit lined with cement and old newspapers, they found a kennel marked Mercy Prototype 1. The metal was bent from the inside, and within the rusted bolts, they found etchings scratched by claw or tooth, spelling one word over and over, and no more. The final sighting of Elena came from a construction crew building a veterinary university wing. She stood at the edge of a newly dug foundation, staring down into the hole as if looking into her own grave. Mercy sat beside her, impossibly still, eyes glowing faintly against the setting sun. Neither moved as the machines roared around them. The workers claimed they looked away for just a second. When they turned back, the women and the dog were gone. But in the hole, newly dug and filled with shadow, they saw movement, something writhing, something waiting. That night, the wind howled like 1,000 lost puppies. Somewhere in a forgotten county tucked between state lines, a small family moved into a modest farmhouse flanked by fields that never grew quite right. The mother, Diane, was a first-grade teacher. The father, Lucas, worked as a mechanic, and their daughter, Ava, just 7, had been asking for a dog since she could speak. They didn't know about the forest nearby, or the strange markings found carved into trees, or why the realtor refused to stay past sundown when showing them the house. All they saw was potential, space, quiet, and finally a place to raise their little girl without sirens screaming every night. They moved in late September. By October, Ava had stopped asking for a dog because one showed up. No barking, no scratching at the door. Just there one morning, curled up on their porch like it belonged. A St. Bernard, ribs faintly showing, with eyes that looked too old and too tired. Ava called it Lady. It wore no collar, no chip, but it knew the layout of their house almost immediately. It followed Ava to the bathroom, to her bed, to the woodshed where she played with sticks and invented games only children could understand. At first, Diane and Lucas welcomed it, assuming some poor soul had dumped the dog and they were simply giving it a better life. But strange things began to happen. Birds stopped perching on their fence. The neighbor's dog, a pit bull named Hank, refused to come onto their property. The air inside the house grew thick, like it never fully dried after rain. And Ava started talking to someone else at night. Not Lady, someone else. Someone she called Miss Elin. Diane found crayon drawings under her daughter's bed, dozens of them, of a woman with red arms and no shoes, always standing behind Lady, always holding a baby wrapped in black. When asked who Miss Elin was, Ava shrugged. She lives in the dog, she said. She says Lady came to nest. Diane laughed it off at first, but then the dreams began. Cold, wet dreams where she woke up holding her breath, reaching for something she didn't recognize. Lucas began waking up in the barn. He didn't remember walking there. Once, he came in with a scratch across his chest, as if something had been sleeping on him. Then Ava got sick. It wasn't a cold. It wasn't a fever. She simply stopped eating, talking, blinking too long at shadow. Her skin paled, and her eyes took on that same distant look they'd once seen in Lady. The doctor found nothing. Blood tests were normal. Her body functioned fine. But something vital was draining out of her, slowly and surely, like someone poking tiny holes in her soul. And still Lady remained, watching, sleeping beside her bed, licking the condensation from the windows in perfect silence. Diane tried locking her outside one. They found the doorknob melted. Not broken, melted. That night, Ava spoke for the first time in days. Miss Elin says it's almost time. The last puppy wants out. Lucas tried to get rid rid of the dog himself, loaded into his truck, and drove 10 miles away, past the gas station, past the old cornfield where no grass grew. When he returned home an hour later, Lady was already waiting on the porch. She was dry, clean, and her belly looked swollen. The next morning, Diane woke up in the whelping position, knees bent, sheets soaked, crying echoing in her ears. But the house was empty. No Ava, no Lucas, no Lady, just a trail of footprints, barefoot, adult size, and paw print beside them, leading out into the fog choke with behind the house. She followed them, one trembling step at a time. They led to a clearing. There, carved into the dirt, was a perfect spiral. At its center sat Mercy. Not Lady Mercy, larger now, almost regal, her fur matted with blood and ash, her mouth slightly open as if breathing a lullaby. And behind her, standing among the trees, were dozens of others. Dogs, yes, but not fully. And people, or echoes of them. Rachel, the nurse from the hospital, the little boy from the news, all of them still, all of them watching. Ava stood beside them, smiling faint. Lucas kneeled with his back turned, cradling something Diane couldn't see. Mercy stepped aside, and at the center of the spiral, a single puppy emerged, pale, slick, its eyes already open, its mouth opening to let out a sound like static. Diane screamed, but no one heard it. The clearing swallowed it like a well, and then silence, not peace, silence. The spiral closed itself with wind and leaves and ash. The farmhouse stood empty the next day. The stove burned cold, the light didn't work, and the neighbor, the one who still checked in from time to time, swore he saw a giant dog sitting inside the window that night, watching him through the curtain. He never returned. The town wrote off the family as a tragedy, an accident. No one talked about the reports that came later, of new dogs appearing in shelters already pregnant, of children whispering to people who weren't there, of mirrors cracking when no one touched them. But the rescue world knew. The ones who had been there long enough remembered the sign. One vet, retired, blind in one eye, put up a sign in his now abandoned clinic before he vanished. It read, "Do not trust a dog that cries." And deep in the wood, beneath dirt that never settles in trees that never bloom, Mercy builds. Always building, always birthing, always watching. And if you listen, really listen, on the right kind of night, you can still hear the soft scratching of tiny paws, trying to be born